Hi, I'm Greta.
And I'm Scott, and we're the board game couple, turning game night
into date night. Hey, grab your sword, get together your spell components, and don't forget your D20. Strange events have been occurring in the hills by the city of Red Larch, and you and your fellow adventurers have been hired to go find out exactly what is happening in the caves outside of the city.
Dungeons & Dragons, Temple of Elemental Evil, designed by Peter Lee and Ben Petrisor, is the fourth RPG in a box published by Wizards of the Coast. In it, you and up to 4 others delve into dungeons in an effort to stop some elemental cults from taking over. Exploring the dungeons involves drawing from a stack of these tiles and applying the effect on them, whether that be monsters or traps. In most cases, you're looking for a specific tile, which will then prompt an encounter, a final boss monster, if you will. There are 13 chapters total, each with a unique scenario in this story of fighting off evil and saving the day.
I love this game. I am a huge D&D fan, and it really fulfills my D&D craving for the nights when maybe I don't have a DM available, or there are not enough people who want to start a campaign with me. This really fulfills that D&D need. And if you're new to D&D or are trying to get someone else into D&D, this is a really good introduction. Not all of the rules are the same, but it does work pretty much exactly the way D&D works. So it's pretty cool, and it will definitely make you feel more comfortable going into your first real live RPG campaign version. This game, I'm not so sure about its replayability. Like Scott mentioned, there are a lot of chapters, and they're really interesting. The story is super engaging, and each chapter has different game mechanics, which keeps you on your toes and makes it really interesting as you play. But once you finish the game, you sort of finish the game. Scott and I went through with a pair of characters who we really enjoyed playing with, and when we tried to replay it with new characters, I didn't have as much fun.
No. One of the things that I like is that the game difficulty kind of scales. There is this deck of cards that starts off separate from the rest of the cards in the box. And what happens is at the end of each of the scenarios, it will say, okay, did you pass, did you fail, or did you really, really succeed? And then it'll tell you, instruct you to swap new cards into the various decks in order to scale the difficulty. So if you succeeded, they'll put cards that make it more difficult on you. If you didn't succeed, then you'll get more beneficial items or spells or things like that. So I like the way that this game responds to the way that you've been playing and scales appropriately. The minis in this are actually super cool and might be worth the purchase of the game on their own. Now, they are unpainted, but that's something that you can fix. These are super cool, and I think it might be worth it just to get the game just for those minis. If you have a campaign, use those guys, start using them, hang out with them, put them in your game. The game, I feel, one of the negatives is that the game punishes you for sticking with your party. The game, when you're going through and going and exploring these tiles or exploring the dungeon, you have to turn one of these over each time on your turn, or you have to draw a card from a separate encounter deck. Now that encounter deck, when you draw it, is usually pretty much always negative in that you're taking a bunch of damage, either just you or everybody in the dungeon. And so I really felt that while I wanted to stay and fight the monsters that were near Greta, I had to go turn over my own tile, or we would both really be suffering from an attack that was kind of unavoidable.
I could handle my own monsters.
Oh, yeah, sorry. But I wanted to work with her, and what ends up happening is you kind of have to separate. I also really felt that most of the chapters felt really samey. It was always find tile labeled blah, put it in a stack of 4, mix them up, and then put that about 12th down, and just keep going until you find that tile which triggers the final fight. And it's just doing that 13 times. It did, I don't know, it kind of got repetitive and redundant by the end of the game. It was still fun, I just didn't like, oh, here we go again.
I disagree.
Yeah,
I felt like there were a couple different types of scenarios and that they were cycled through multiple times. So I totally disagree.
Yeah, well, I always, every time it said, find this tile, grab 4 other ones, mix them together, and then put it down about this low into the stack. I think that was probably 8 or 9 of the scenarios was that, and yeah. But finally, even though it's a co-op game, you are competing for some of the end of scenario upgrades. At the end of every scenario, you leave the dungeon and you go back to town. And when you're in town, you have the ability to buy things. You can buy these power upgrades. And there are a finite number of them. They also, each time you buy one, the next one goes up in price. So if there was something you wanted, like you want to be able to heal yourself 2 hit points, well, if Greta buys it first, not only are there less of them now, but it's more expensive for me. So I found that a lot of times I was trying to, I in fact tried to gauge what Greta was interested in and just not pick those, and just we would be focusing on different types of power upgrades. But it's still a fun game.
On the power upgrades, I think the key there is to just work with your teammates. This is a co-op game, so you shouldn't be competing for power-ups. You should be communicating about, hey, my character's not as strong as yours, or I tend to go straight into battle more often. I need the health. Whereas your character's super sneaky, like maybe you need this to do this move over and over again. So I wouldn't really say you're competing for them, but you do have to figure out your own individual strategies to make that feature work.
Likewise, if you end up with a bunch of tiles where you're going to get the monsters are how you got money. And so if you could afford, just because you happen to fight all the monsters, if you could afford more treasure or more upgrades than your other players, then you're like, hey, can you not buy that right now? I know I can't right now either, but can you hang out and hold on to it for just a little bit, especially when some of the encounter cards in the encounter deck make you lose money. It was always spend it while you got it. And so that was a function of the game that I didn't, while I adapted to how it worked, it wasn't something that I really dug.
Yeah, it didn't bother me so much. I feel like just like in a regular D&D game, you have to be willing to work with the team, even if it's not always in the best interest for your character. So I just really felt like it stayed true to that.
Yeah, cool. So, Dungeons & Dragons Temple of Elemental Evil. Is that a fight night or a date night?
Date night, and I will play it on any date ever. I mean, with him, of course.
Whoa.
But absolutely date night. I think it's really fun. It's more mindless than regular D&D. The RPG aspect is not a part of it. But the game really feeds you the storyline, so you don't need it. And I think it's just really interesting. I mean, I remember many nights we were playing this game, we stayed up super late because I just kept wanting to play chapter after chapter after chapter. So date night for me.
I am really, I'm waffling, and I'm right on the edge. I think I'll call it a date night because the game isn't broken. It still functions. However, because of its desire to split you up and just have you basically wandering on your own in the same dungeon as the rest of the group, and because of the competitiveness when it comes to purchasing powers and the finite number of them, I'm right on the edge of calling no, fight night, not interested. As I mentioned in our Mice and Mystics review, I brought this game up as a comparison. I don't think there's anything in this game that Mice and Mystics doesn't do better. And so anytime that this would be brought up, I would probably say, why don't we do Mice and Mystics instead?
But to be fair, fight night means we fought about it. Do you think that this caused tension when we played it?
I thought that I was racing against you to get things done so that our characters could be balanced. So I felt that in a way we were competing even though we were on the same team.
I totally disagree. I did not have that experience. For the first time in board game couple history, we do not agree about a game we're reviewing.
And that's totally fine. I will still totally play it. I'm still totally down. Like I said, we doubt the replayability of it, so I don't think... So
it just ends up taking a lot of space
on
your shelf.
It is a very big box. And it's cool because there is a lot in it, especially these really cool minis. And like I said, I think it might be worth it just for those minis. Just grab those instead of the blind boxes that they sell the painted versions in. Just grab these, use them in your game. I think it's awesome, but wow, I could think of, even in the same niche, I could think of a different game I'd rather play.
If you liked this video, please make sure to click like.
And if you want to see more, make sure you click subscribe so that next time you can see us talk about Mwah!